All set. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our briefing, Clean Manufacturing in America. I'm Dan Brissett. I'm the president of the Environmental and Energy Study Institute. Welcome to our third installment of our Congressional Climate Camp briefing series. Big thanks to Senator Merkley and his great staff for their help arranging the room for today. EESI was founded on a bipartisan basis more than 40 years ago to provide science-based information about environmental, energy, and climate change topics to policymakers and the public. We do our best to ensure that our educational resources are timely, relevant, accessible, and practical. And we put a lot of thought to ensure that they're ready before staff even need to know the information. In Congressional Climate Camp, Dano, am I doing the slides or are you doing the slides? Okay, I will do the slides. I always forget when I do the slides or when I don't do the slides. Is this right? Is this the right one? Okay, good. Anyway, Congressional Climate Camp is one way we try to help congressional staff get settled at the start of a new Congress. And our first briefing was an interactive look into climate modeling, the drivers of climate change, and the benefits of mitigation measures. Oh yeah, there it is. See, mitigation measures available to us. Then a couple weeks ago, we convened an expert panel to teach us all about the budget, appropriations, and reconciliation. And in another 2 weeks, our final briefing in the series will focus on the upcoming Surface Transportation Reauthorization Bill. In addition to Congressional Climate Camp, we also have a ton of other great resources in the works. And as always, the best way to keep up with everything that we're doing is to subscribe to our bi-weekly newsletter, Climate Change Solutions. The latest issue just came out yesterday, and it had lots of great information about natural climate solutions, nature-based solutions, as well as a link to our latest podcast episode, Season 9, where we talked about the very strong bipartisan support for natural climate solutions with our friends, U.S. Nature for Climate. Our discussion today will highlight the ways in which onshoring the manufacturing of clean energy, energy efficiency, and electric vehicle components increases American competitiveness, secures our supply chains, and creates good-paying jobs. According to the 2024 Sustainable Energy in America Factbook, companies announced more than $123 billion in investments in over 100 U.S. manufacturing facilities as a result of the Inflation Reduction Act. And that all happened in less than 2 years. It's a huge impact of that legislation. And these new domestic manufacturing operations make all sorts of things, from solar panels to batteries to energy efficient appliances to wind turbines, you name it, in locations all across the country. Research from E2 finds that these manufacturing plants are expected to create 67,000 jobs, and that's just in rural areas. I'm really looking forward to learning about how growth in domestic manufacturing and the clean energy transition support each other to help meet increasing demand, all while reinvesting in the communities they are located in. Today, we will also explore recent congressional actions that spurred this manufacturing boom, as well as possible policy opportunities to leverage the momentum to keep Americans employed in good-paying jobs in the clean energy sector for as long as possible. But before we get started, 3 more things. 1, I mentioned the Sustainable Energy in America Factbook. The latest issue of that is just barely out, it's hot off the presses, and we'll actually be hosting a briefing on April 1st with the Business Council for Sustainable Energy and Bloomberg NEF, which are the 2 organizations that produce the Factbook every year. That's not a joke, it's April 1st, and we're going to review the latest findings. It's a tremendous resource. It's one of our most popular briefings every year. Watch your inbox for the upcoming briefing notice. And I think actually if you visit us online at www.esi.org, you can RSVP right now. Second, we will have a question and answer period. We'll take questions from our online audience. And I know a lot of people are watching this online from their desks today. If you have a question, you can send us an email. The email address to use is ask, that's ASK, at eesi.org. Also follow us on social media at EESI Online. We'll be doing real-time coverage on our Instagram story and Blue Sky. And third, speaking of feedback, we have a survey. And we actually added a couple new questions this week. So it'd be a great week to take a look at it. If you've completed our survey in the past, thank you. We read every response. If you have a few moments to take our survey today, we'd really appreciate it. We'll put that link back up if you want to wait to see actually how the briefing goes before you rate us. You're allowed to do that too. But if you want to do it now, that's great. And please take a look at those new questions. That brings us to our awesome panel. Tom Lewis works with Blue-Green Alliance's industrial and federal teams, focusing on new investments in clean manufacturing and industrial transformation. He joined the Blue-Green Alliance from Advanced Energy Economy, where he worked with the federal policy team, clean energy businesses, and allies, to advocate for passage for the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the Inflation Reduction Act, increased funding for the Defense Production Act, and robust implementation of clean manufacturing programs. Before AEE, Tom worked at the Rural Health Network of South Central New York, where he led food system, rural development, and anti-hunger efforts. Tom, thank you for joining us today. I'll turn the lectern over to you. I'm really looking forward to your presentation.
We're going to do one thing quickly. We have some buzzing going on, so I think I know what it is. And we'll try this. Where does this?
Let's see if
Here
this
it
works.
is. Yep. That stopped the buzzer. Do we know?
Go ahead, Tom.
We all good?
Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much. Appreciate the intro. I'm really excited to be here. I am Tom Lewis, a federal policy manager at Blue Green Alliance. We are a national organization of labor unions and environmental organizations who believe that you should not have to choose between a good job and a clean environment. We can and must have both. So really excited to be here today to talk about clean technology manufacturing in the US. So first, I think a definition would be helpful here because clean technology manufacturing can mean very different things to different people. At BGA, we define this very broadly. So the pieces that I'm talking about today are the manufacturing of clean energy components like solar and wind, EVs and EV charging, and all of the related supply chains that go into that. Inputs that go into those processes, such as cement, steel and aluminum, building efficiency products such as heat pumps, and there's several other things such as rail, clean hydrogen, carbon capture. All of these things are kind of part of this ecosystem that I'm going to be talking about. So why is clean technology manufacturing important? So there's 5 things that I want to address here just to really set the scene for this conversation. 1, it ensures that U.S. workers are capturing the gains of these innovative industries. If we lose this manufacturing capacity in this country, or do we not bring it here, that's losing a lot of economic value that's available when you're talking about manufacturing these products. Additionally, this is going to redress some of the economic impacts that have resulted from the decline of manufacturing jobs that have resulted over the last several decades. Third, it builds reliable and affordable supply chains. We don't only have to look back to the pandemic or Russia's invasion of Ukraine to understand how important energy supply chains are to national security as well as economic well-being. Fourth, counters the pollution and worker exploitation that plagues some overseas clean technology supply chains. And 5, provides U.S. leadership for the technologies of the future. And I think that one is very important to emphasize a bit here. If the US is not providing leadership in this space on the manufacturing of these technologies, there are a lot of other countries that are prepared to and investing billions of dollars in doing so. Second, as was pointed out, there's been a lot of legislation passed in the last few years related to clean technology manufacturing. For instance, the Inflation Reduction Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and the CHIPS and Science Act. So with that has come a lot of growth in this space. And I wanted to point out a few pieces of that with just some big numbers for everyone to crunch on here. So according to Jack Conness, who has been tracking this stuff, we've seen $388 billion of announced investments in batteries, electric vehicles, solar, wind, and semiconductors since the Inflation Reduction Act and the CHIPS and Science Act passed. So a very big number and a lot of growth from what was happening previous to that. One of the best things, and I'm gonna show a chart after this, to look at this is in the growth of manufacturing construction. So you see that in December 2024, we were up to, as a country, $237 billion spent on that, which is up from $80 billion in October 2019. Additionally, business and consumer investment in these pieces has risen very dramatically since that time period in the last 2 years. You can see a 71% increase from what that was before these pieces of legislation passed. And then lastly, a lot of job creation is already happening in this space and is projected to. As I talked about, we're seeing a lot of manufacturing construction growth, but that means that those facilities aren't yet open. So I've seen some estimates of around 100,000 to to 200,000 new manufacturing jobs. But with all of this construction, a study that we commissioned with the University of Massachusetts Amherst found that we could create 336,000 manufacturing jobs per year over the lifetime of this legislation. As I mentioned, I have a fun little chart here that just shows the growth in manufacturing construction spending that's been going on. You see that for a while it was very stagnant, including when we got to the COVID recession, and then has really skyrocketed since the last pieces of those legislation. And if you look at this not only in nominal but real terms, you're going to see the exact same thing, that we have seen remarkable growth on this front, largely coming from the investments in batteries, semiconductor, and solar across the US. So clean technology manufacturing and job growth, just really quickly talking about this study, 2/3 of job creation is expected to occur in manufacturing construction for these sectors. This contrasts with where the economy was growing before that. And this chart here shows that a lot of the share of investments in there is going to disadvantaged communities. This is just a piece of employment of manufacturing. I'll just note that we've seen a lot of decline in manufacturing employment over the last 20 years, especially after recessions. It changed with the COVID recession to where we've actually gone positive since that period. But you can see that we've stalled out there, which is an important thing for policymakers to consider. I won't spend too much time on this, but we do have done a lot of research in the last few years that you can find at the event page on supply chain mapping. We've covered every one of those sectors that I talked about and in EV, and have a number of different tools where you can look at and see exactly where these investments are happening around the country. I'll just note, you can see they're very spread out, and we have investments happening all over the place. We also did a lot of work on supply chain gap analysis, and that DOE has done a great job on, and we want DOE to continue to have the capacity to utilize this analysis. You can see right there all the pieces that go into solar panels that are being manufactured, and it's important to understand where the gaps are in that analysis when the federal government is looking to invest scarce dollars. And then last, what I'll leave you with are just a couple of policy considerations for policymakers as we look to move forward in clean technology manufacturing. So first is that due to policy developments, the US lost manufacturing capacity. And we can do that again. If we do not continue the momentum that we have seen here over the last few years, and we take that away, a lot of these announcements can go away. We can lose jobs, as we have in solar and the semiconductor industry, where we used to be the leader. We're only just gaining that back. Second, manufacturing is capital intensive and requires a number of different funding avenues in both debt and equity, and federal funding is a big piece of that now. It can be the difference between projects penciling out or closing down. Third, manufacturing productivity in the US has undergone a slowdown over the last decade. It's going to be important for the public and private sector to work together to understand more about why that is. Fourth, demand for new manufacturing workers, as I mentioned, means that several occupations could face labor shortages. It's going to be important to work with labor unions, states, municipalities, those that are doing workforce development on figuring out solutions to these things to keep these products affordable. And fifth, the capacity to produce supply chain research, which DOE has done so well, we need to keep that momentum up. That means investing in staff at these agencies who do such a good job, investing in market experts on these things. So really the private sector can get a good feel for where investment opportunities lie, and the federal government continue to do that. And with that, we've got some social media links, and I'll be available after for anyone to connect. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you. Before we move on to Leilani, I just wanted to ask, you said where people could find, where is it? This supply chain mapping. Where can people dig this information up?
It's on our website. It's also on the event. I sent it to you all for the event page.
Great. Okay, so that's what I was thinking of. So if you visit www.esi.org, you go to the briefing page. We list other resources as well as the presentation materials. And so if you want to do a deeper dive into this, that's one way to do it. And then Tom helpfully put his contact information up as well. I just wanted to make sure people knew that. For folks who have arrived since we started, the presentation materials are also on the front table. If you missed a little bit of Tom's excellent presentation, no worries. His slides are also available online, and you can also go back and rewatch the live cast to make sure that you don't miss anything of what he had to say. That brings us to our second panelist today. Leilani Gonzalez is the Chief of Staff and Policy Director of the Zero Emission Transportation Association. Leilani brings a unique understanding of local, state, and federal processes and procedures to her roles at ZETA. Leilani began her public service career in the Florida State Legislature, and after transitioning to Washington, D.C., she served as a staff person in the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. Leilani, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm looking forward to your presentation.
I'm short. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is, as Dan mentioned, my name is Leilani Gonzalez. I'm the Chief of Staff and Policy Director for the Zero Emission Transportation Association, otherwise known as ZETA. I've been with the organization for the past close to 4 years, and what a journey in the EV market that's been. So ZETA is a federal coalition that advocates for the advancement of the electric vehicle supply chain. We actually represent critical mineral extractors, battery manufacturers, battery recyclers, automakers, charging operators, and manufacturers as well, and of course our utilities. With over 50 member companies, ZETA is committed to enacting policies that drive EV adoption, create the hundreds of thousands of jobs, and maintain American competitiveness in these markets. Today, I'm going to provide an update on the growth of the domestic and global EV industry, the investments of the U.S. supply chain, and the importance of American competitiveness in sustaining these domestic investments. So first, I would like to say that it is important to note that EV sales globally are on the rise. We have, across the world, we have more than 17 million battery, electric, and plug-in hybrids that were sold in 2024. That is 25% more than 2023. As part of this, more than a million fully battery electric vehicles were sold in the United States this last year alone. This is the second time that more than 1 million EVs were sold in a calendar year in the United States, which in 2021, we were just at 3% of the market. So, and for context, that is double the rate of EVs that were sold between 2020 and 2022. So who's leading these global markets? While the industry continues to grow, it is important to recognize that global competition is also growing, and that emerging sector is intensifying. China and Europe currently sell more EVs than in the United States year over year. China, a note, China has actually grown their share percentage over 53% last year in the EV market rate and in hybrids. As a percentage of vehicles sold, all these trend lines do continue to move upward. However, global competitors are much farther along in battery and electric plug-in hybrids. So this slide shows China, UK, EU, Canada, US, South Korea, and then Japan at the bottom in purple. So I know that that text is a little small, but hopefully folks on the live stream can see it. What does this mean for the United States, though? The U.S. market for vehicles is equipped with batteries that is growing quickly, and particularly when you're looking at the compound annual growth rates. Since 2015, battery electric vehicles and hybrids have grown at the fastest rate of 42%, which you can see on the graph. Hybrids, meanwhile, have grown about 19%. For comparison, combustion engine vehicles sales declined about 3% from 2015 to 2024. So that is that gray line here. And then hybrids are purple, and battery electric growth is the dark blue. But this is not by accident. As a result of the continued investment in the domestic supply chain, and as a result of the industrial policies passed in recent years, we've seen an explosion of the market grow. We've specifically in the EV and battery supply chain, there have been an announced $188 billion of private sector's investments across the country. The research group Atlas Public Policy estimates that over $1.2 trillion is being invested in battery electric vehicles globally. 26 of that is just coming from the United States right here in our backyard. This is also just happening throughout the country, and community buy-in is so important to get folks understanding what makes these investments work, getting local education out there through city managers, city planners, mayors, and understanding how we can sustain these investments is a critical part of understanding what's happening here in Capitol Hill. So we have a quick breakdown of what these investments look like. The majority of that is actually the battery supply chain, which is huge for the dual use applications for both commercial use and also continued military readiness, we'd like to note. We've also seen a trend of global battery prices becoming cheaper, which is also leading towards more affordable battery pricing. In short, it's changed over the past couple of years. While looking at the cost of batteries, obviously the most expensive part of an EV is the battery itself. So if we're looking at the price parity coming from 2010, which is about $1,400 per kilowatt, all the way through 2024, which is about $115 per kilowatt hour, that's a 90% price decrease. That's due to innovation, economies of scale, domestic investments, and when EV batteries become cheaper, that hopefully will mean EVs become cheaper as well. But that still lends toward education, innovation, and making sure that these investments at home stay at home. All right, I have a quick question for the room. Who here has driven an EV? Okay. I saw a couple I've been in a test drive. Who here has hesitancy to buy one still? You're not hesitant? No, we got a couple still skeptics. Does that mean, is that a question about charging infrastructure? We're also working on that too. Of course, making sure that we have different vehicles on the market. The more types of vehicles on the market will reduce, economies of scale will reduce costs, cheaper battery packs, more affordable battery packs. But that is not all that what means to drive an EV. Infrastructure is so important as well. The good news is thanks to the public investments from the public and private sector, the U.S. public charging network is growing. There were only about 100,000 public charging connectors in the U.S. as of 2020, and preliminary data indicates that this has been doubled by the end of 2024. So we're about 210 public chargers. Between August 2023 and July 2024, per the Joint Office, the industry was installing 1,000 new connectors each week. I know there's questions about the NEVI program and CFI and how we're going to continue to sustain public charging, because we want to really reduce that. I don't like to say the word range anxiety. I like to say change anxiety, and what those behavioral patterns mean for how do you plan your road trips? How do you get your family moving from school and dance class and soccer without that, that fear of where will I be able to charge? So it's a huge component, and I think between the chicken and the egg of charging infrastructure versus vehicle adoption, you really need to see the chargers out there so you can feel more comfortable. Take me to the next slide. more chargers can have a real impact on EV interest. I moved into a new building a couple of years ago and I said, oh, well, they have chargers here. That's great. It does kind of start making you think out future purchases and saying, if I want a long time home, do I want to invest in a home charger? Does my workplace have a charger? And how do I create an ecosystem of available sources so I don't have that change anxiety? According to Pew Research, 64% of Americans live within 2 miles of public charging stations. And that study also showed that 47% of adults that live less than a mile away are more likely to pursue or purchase an EV. I know I've talked a lot about passenger cars and what these consumer dynamics mean of the market and manufacturing. So I also want to note that the electrification transition is also happening in different vehicle segments as well. Vans, trucks, and buses, 2 and 3-wheeled vehicles are also being electrified. Globally, this is moving forward primarily in Asia, but commercial EVs are just getting started. Their global rate of sale is about 4% in 2023, and this is a growing market that Americans can manufacture and invest in. I talk a little bit about critical minerals and battery trends. Critical minerals are on the top of mind for a lot of folks. So I just want to talk about a little bit about the diversification and how we're looking at battery manufacturing across domestic manufacturing, domestic production. So competing on a global market scale does mean advanced critical mineral policy, trade, and making sure that we have the right permitting and consistent federal policy to make sure that we support a global critical minerals future. They're not only vital to modern technologies, but also for continued military readiness, healthcare, and of course, an EV future. The impact of onshoring and bringing these jobs, critical minerals, and EV manufacturing home, I'm going to skip this because we're running out a little short on time, is what does this all mean? We have infrastructure, we have critical minerals, we have EVs on the road. Something that I like to say is that look at the EV on the road, that actually, and peel back that layer, that's thousands of people of working on RD&D, that's people working in the plants, that's city managers getting the permitting across the line, that's a full ecosystem of how do we uplift communities. Something that I've been really leaning on is direct jobs, of course, indirect jobs, and really those induced jobs, those personal stories of somebody bringing their food truck to an auto manufacturing plant, somebody coming and building a brewery by a plant because they know that there's going to be a bunch of people hanging out after work. So this full ecosystem in this global market is advancing manufacturing in the United States on a global competitive scale, but also it's hitting us right here at home in a really unique way. So thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Leilani. And please be responsible if you stop for a beer after your shift building electric vehicles or batteries, please. We want to keep the roads safe for everyone. If you have questions for our panelists, if you are in the room, we'll have a microphone. If you're in our online audience, you can send us an email. And the email address to use is ask, that's ask@eesi.org. And we'll do our best to incorporate all the questions that we get into the conversation that will happen after our fourth panelist. But our third panelist is Charlie McCrudden. Charlie leads Daikin's legislative affairs work. Daikin has more than 22,000 employees in the United States, many of whom work at 25 manufacturing locations in 17 different states. Prior to joining Daikin, Charlie served as Vice President of Government Relations at the Air Conditioning Contractors of America, a trade association representing small and large HVAC contracting companies. He began his career in Congress, serving 6 years as a legislative assistant to a member from Ohio. He has degrees from Franklin and Marshall College and University of Virginia. Charlie, thank you so much for joining us today. I'll forward ahead to your slides. Looking forward to what you got to say.
Thank you very much, Dan. Okay. Did I miss the? Okay, good. So as Dan mentioned, I'm Charlie McCrudden with Daikin U.S. Corporation. I'm going to talk a little bit about Daikin as our company and sort of how we view manufacturing. I'm going to talk a little bit about our technology, and Tom mentioned heat pumps, and I think everyone's familiar with heat pumps in some way. And then I'll talk about the Defense Production Act for heat pumps, which is a program that we are taking part in as a manufacturer, and I'll describe our project. But I first want to start with a question about how many of you have heard of Daikin? And it's okay not to know who Daikin is. Okay, all right, this is better than I thought. Honestly, it's we have a bit of a brand name recognition problem. Everyone knows our competitors, but they don't know us, in part because how often do you buy a new central air conditioner or heat pump or natural gas furnace? Generally between 15 and 20, every 15 and 20 years. So you don't see us advertising as much as, say, an automobile manufacturer, but we're out there and we're employing lots and lots of Americans. So just so that I'm just going to go through a little bit of facts about us. We're the largest global manufacturer of HVAC solutions. We have more than 98,000 employees worldwide. As Dan mentioned in my intro, we have 22,000 working in the US. We play a leading role in the transformation of the HVAC-R industry. The R is refrigeration, and we do have a footprint on refrigeration as well. We have been in the United States more than 30 years, and we are all about open innovation, sustainability goals, indoor air comfort. We're the largest manufacturer of air filters and air filtration equipment in the world, and enabling stronger communities. So while we are a global company based in Japan, Daikin has many brands that operate in the United States, and you can see here on the far left is Daikin Applied Americas. That's our commercial and light commercial division. Daikin Comfort Technologies North America. That is our residential and other light commercial division. And you may recognize the Amana brand on the bottom there. If you've ever stayed in a hotel, oftentimes or a dormitory or a hospital room, we make a special, what we call a PTAC, a portable, no, I don't even remember what the acronym stands for, but it's a special unit that's oftentimes used in those types of spaces. AAF Flanders, if you've ever purchased an air filter at Home Depot or Lowe's, it may be branded Rheem, it may be branded Precision Air, it may be branded AAF Flanders. We make them all for those brands. We private label for a lot of companies. Daikin America is our chemical company. Daikin America, our chemical company, is located in Alabama. We make fluoropolymers. Fluoropolymers that actually serve the semiconductor industry that was referenced earlier, and also EV batteries. So we're a major supplier to the EV battery industry. AHT Cooling Systems USA, that is our commercial refrigeration division. If you have ever been to a Whole Foods and seen the mochi ball container, those are ours. If you've ever been to a Lidl store, every commercial refrigeration unit, the wall units and the floor units in a Lidl store come from a little AHT, which is in South Carolina. And finally, All World Machinery Supply is our oil hydraulic unit. The best way to describe their products are the machinery behind machines. And they're used a lot in automobile manufacturing. It's the machinery behind a presser, a crimper, or a stamper. And we've taken highly sophisticated compressor technology from the air conditioning world, and applied it to oil hydraulics. I just want to focus on a couple key points here because I think we are, as the only manufacturer on the panel, think of us as sort of a case study here. So we have 22,000 employees in the US. We have 25 production bases in the United States. And I'll get to that in a second. We have 9 R&D centers. Daikin as a company, we make products where we sell products. We're not a big importer-exporter. So this is our, what I call our major footprint locations. All of the blue, those are manufacturing plants, typically 100 employees or more. The cluster down there outside of Houston, Texas, one of those factories I'll get to later, that is our flagship production facility, and it has more than 10,000 workers there right now making our residential and light commercial products. And just again, as we are a global company, and as you can see here, we have factories all over the world. And again, we make where we sell. So we're not a big importer from Asia. We're not a big importer from Europe. We have 37 manufacturing plants in Europe. We have 25 in the United States. We have 23 in Asia and Oceania, which doesn't include either Japan or China. So we may be a little bit different, but this is our attitude about manufacturing. We make where we sell. We are involved in the community where we have manufacturing plants. All right, our technology. We have 3 core technologies at Daikin. One is a heat pump. The second is the inverter compressor, which I mentioned a little bit earlier. And the third is the R32 refrigerant. You may be aware that our industry is transitioning away from high global warming potential refrigerants to low global warming potential refrigerants. That transition started on January 1st of this year. I'm not going to touch on that, but that is something we are very, very proud of, is driving that transition to low GWP refrigerants. Heat pumps and inverter heat pumps I do want to focus on. I think I'll just describe a heat pump simply as basically a heat pump is an air conditioner that can go in reverse. And when you think about your refrigerator at home, you put your hand behind the refrigerator, it's very hot. Why is that? Because the air conditioner is making things cold, right? Actually, the air conditioner, or the refrigerator is making things cold. Actually, what the refrigerator is doing is it's sucking the heat out of that space. It doesn't make things cold, I say in air quotes. It removes heat, and it expresses the heat out the back of the refrigerator, okay? So that's basically what an air conditioner does. A heat pump is an air conditioner that can go both ways. It can suck the heat out of a space, or it can suck the heat out of the air and bring it into that space. An inverter compressor, and I'll get to in a second, is a very, very smart compressor. Your typical air conditioning system has I'll just say has a dumb compressor. And I'll describe what a smart compressor is in a second. I've sort of already covered this slide, but basically, if I wanted to, I could take the next 2 hours to give a physics and chemistry lesson on how refrigerants work. Basically, think about it this way. When you clean off your keyboard with that air canister, what happens when you press down and the gas is released from that canister? The can gets very cold, right? And if you think about how can I manipulate that activity? Well, imagine taking the gas that was released from that canister and cramming it back in and releasing it again and doing that over and over and over again. And instead of just holding that can in your hand, you blew air over it, okay? When you release the gas, the can gets cold. If you compress the gas, that's the compressor, it makes that cycle. That's like the 1-minute version of my 2-hour physics, which I can't do. There's no 2-hour physics class, but that's sort of how I describe it. This is an inverter compressor. The one on the left is the conventional compressor in a home. When you turn the thermostat up or down, okay, the thing cranks on. You hear that noise that's outside, or maybe it's your neighbors that comes on all the time. And that thing runs at full bore, 100%, on. Thermostat satisfied, off. Thermostat's not satisfied anymore, on, off. That's inefficient, okay? That's like trying to run a marathon as a sprinter. You're gonna sprint for 100 meters, then you're gonna rest. Then you're gonna sprint for 100 meters, and then you're gonna rest. You're gonna be dead at the end. An inverter compressor has multiple speeds. It's not on or off. The inverter compressor says, hey, it's a mild day today. I only need to run at 37%, or maybe it's 29%. Ooh, you know what? It's actually 26%. And I'm gonna hit that spot and I'm gonna hold it all day long. It's gonna run quietly in the background all day long. But you know what? The overall, it's gonna save a ton of energy. It's gonna be a lot quieter. And it's got benefits. Oh, I jumped ahead of myself on my slide here. There are other benefits, which includes demand response. Now, we've seen a lot of issues where people don't want to sign up for a demand response because I don't want the utility turning off my air conditioner in the middle of the worst day in July. Well, in this case, the utility could turn it down in such a way you may not even know. You're still going to be comfortable. You're still going to feel okay, but it's not turning you off. So there's a lot of benefits to these inverter compressors that we have been pushing as a company and trying to get more penetration. You go to Europe and Asia, 90% of the essential air conditioner, well, it's all heat pumps in those countries. It's all inverters. In the United States, maybe 10%. We're trying to change that. That's a big part of Daikin's ethos. All right, this is our Daikin, Texas Technology Park. We built this 6 years ago, $500 million investment, more than 100 acre. It's 100 acres, more than, says 7 football. Yeah, it's 7 football fields in one location under one roof. And this is where we started our Defense Production Act for heat pump project. Last year, we received a $39 million matching grant from the Department of Energy to expand the production of heat pumps at the facility. Again, it's the one down in Houston, Texas. What you see on here are the 16 other companies, U.S. companies, that took part in the Defense Production Act for heat pumps. We got a $39 million grant. We're matching that $39 million grant. We are bringing six types of heat pumps from Thailand, Belgium, and the Czech Republic to the United States. About 275 jobs. One of the heat pumps we're bringing over, the ones from Europe, it is a air-to-water heat pump. This is a boiler replacement product. So if you have a boiler in your home and you want to heat the water using electricity to circulate it through your pipes, this is your product. So imagine all those boilers that are old and inefficient and operating on gas and oil in the Northeast, the Midwest, and the Northwest. This is an option. Oh, by the way, this can heat your water for your dishwasher and your shower as well. And it can provide cooling and heating in the wintertime. We're also bringing our cold climate heat pump product to the United States. So those were currently produced in Thailand. We're bringing them to the United States, and this is part of the DOE Cold Climate Heat Pump Challenge. So I think that's the last. Sorry, went into your slides. So we took part of the DPA for Heat Pump project because we thought this was an important way to bring domestic manufacturing to the United States and show that we can make heat pumps, we can sell heat pumps from Texas. And I said it's about 275 jobs, and we hope to get this project up and running soon. And be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
The room lit up when you mentioned the mochi balls. Everyone's like, "Oh, I know those." Daikin surrounds me. This isn't an energy efficiency briefing; it's a manufacturing briefing. It's not a heat pump briefing, but you should all really go learn how heat pumps work. It's fascinating. It's amazing that even works. And one of Charlie's slides talked about the cold climate, and that's something you may be hearing about is whether or not air conditioning or whether or not heat pumps can work in cold climates, and they actually can. Because even when it's really cold outside, there's still a ton of heat in the air, and it's fascinating. And our next speaker works for an organization that also might be a really great resource for learning about these sorts of things. And that is Nora Wang Esram. Nora leads and manages the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economies research programs, including buildings, industry, transportation, behavior, and health and environment. Before joining ACEEE, Nora was a chief engineer and team lead at the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory for over 10 years, and she spearheaded a variety of multidisciplinary projects advancing building energy efficiency and decarbonization. Nora, thank you so much for joining us today. Really looking forward to your presentation. Oops, let me move ahead a little bit. There we go. Thank you.
All right, thanks for having me. American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, or call ourselves ACEEE, is a nonprofit research organization. We have been doing research to support domestic energy policy to reduce energy waste and improve the efficiency of overall, actually this is a slide, of our economy for 40 decades. We have been in the space of industrial domestic policy for 3 decades and working with federal, states, local governments, and utilities. Well, in my presentation today, I'll discuss the energy demand of the industrial sector and the importance and urgency of reducing energy waste in the industrial sector and the cleanness of the American industry. I'm going to use industrial heat pumps as an example, just to describe the progress the industry has been making and then the challenges they're facing. You can see heat pump is the theme today. Thank you, Charlie, for explaining heat pumps. Now everybody's a pro of heat pumps now. I don't have to spend too much time on it. And then last, I will highlight some opportunities and how Congress and other policymakers can support the industry to make our American manufacturers more competitive globally. Okay, so let's delve in. According to 2022 data, the industrial sectors uses 33% of U.S. energy, account for almost 30% of energy-related carbon emission in the US, right? You don't have to remember all the vertical bars here of different kinds of industry. Just keep it in mind, industry is very complex, right? When we talk about industry, we are talking about many, many different industries. All right, so this is how industrial energy is used. First, you can see over the past 70 years, the energy used in the industry has been doubled. That's number one. Number two, industry use mostly fossil fuel for both power and feedstocks, right? It's not just power. Only 13% of industrial energy use currently is electricity. Okay, so this is a busy diagram, but I'm sure you understand just in 5 seconds. So on the very left-hand side are different sources of energy generation. And then the pink in the middle, you don't need to read. Those are actually the end use where energy goes. From the top, our homes, commercial buildings, industry, where I put a red square around it, and transportation, right? And then on the very right hand, you can see what is being wasted, so-called rejected energy, and then only a quarter of energy generated is being translated or transferred into useful services and products. Waste is a huge problem. Waste meaning higher energy cost and less competitive industry. That's simple. In the industrial sector in particular, 50% of energy is wasted in the process. All right, so next I'm going to further explain, where those wastes occurs and how we're going to reduce that. So let's zoom into the industry energy use. Process heat accounts for 70% of industrial energy use. Process heat is really using mostly steam and fuel in this case to convert raw materials into manufactured products, right? A lot of manufacturing need heat. Overall, process heat accounts for 70% of industrial energy use, and 42% of energy is in the loss in the process. Let's take boiler as an example, right? A steam boiler is a technology invented in 1867, and we're still relying on that in many cases to produce things in the US. A typical boiler converts only 80% of input energy into heat. If you are able to recycle some lost heat at the end, the overall efficiency of the process is still low because it's limited by the boiler technology. In comparison, when we go to industrial heat pumps, right? Charlie explained the reason behind industrial heat pumps, they move heat. They don't use energy to generate heat. So in this case, heat pump technology can produce the same amount of heat with only a quarter of the energy. If you couple that technology with waste heat recycle, you pretty much get a 4 to 5 times efficiency gains. That's a lot, 400 to 500% compared to what is using today. So currently, commercially available industrial heat pump can serve 30% of industrial thermal demand already. And if you go to the higher temperature heat pump, it could increase this to 60% of the current heat needs in the industry. In some sectors, like paper and pulp, chemicals and food and beverages, IHP can offer payback period less than 2 years. Industry is taking actions, right? This is like ongoing effort conducted at ACEEE. If you go to our website, you can always find out where the industrial electrification projects are happening in the US. This is ongoing work. Hopefully, see more push pins over time when we see more projects taking off. All right, another busy slide. IHP is only part of the solution. Right? We need integrated strategies to reimagine the US industry, where they are. It's not that complicated if you look at there are mostly 3 pillars: energy efficiency, electrification, and others. Efficiency has the highest near-term gains. Based on the data from the International Energy Agency, energy efficiency in the industry can use existing cost-effective technologies to reduce industrial energy use by 40%. If you think about that 50% of waste, 40%, it can be reduced through cost-effective measures. I listed different efficiency measures here, at the equipment level, facility level, even supply chain level. The second is electrification. We touched base on lower temperature heat pumps. We actually have a lot of different electric technologies for different temperature needs, right? As I mentioned, IHP is just a small piece of the puzzle. These are all commercially available technology. The last I want to mention is a thermal battery. It may sound new to some of you. It's also called thermal heat batteries or thermal storage. What they do is they convert electricity into heat and store it for days up to 1,800 degrees C. Think about newer manufacturers. If you combine that kind of storage as well as electrification, and you can resolve a lot of problems. All right, so you might be thinking now, this is wonderful, right? Why people are now using it? It should have been seen everywhere. So let me talk about the three barriers that industry is facing, right? Complexity, competition, and cost. I'll unpack them. Well, if you remember the initial slide I showed, there's industry have different colors. It's really, industry is heterogeneous. The solution in one sector cannot be applied to a different sector directly. If you have a heat pump installation in a bear company and you go to a automobile EV company to say, here's your solution, they're gonna ask, no, I want to see, other EV manufacturers doing the same, right? So we need more demonstration to showcase different applications of the same technology. We also need the workforce, the design, the service company to be able to even design, implement, and maintain this new technology. That's the second piece of complexity. And second is about competition. The new technologies are competing against established business and practical and business as usual practices. Equipment replacement can take a long time, right? As Charlie mentioned, how often do you install new air conditioners? It is usually cheaper when you install new technologies, when you have a new facilities, when you have old equipment that need to be replaced. Therefore, this really introducing new technologies to your plants, it's a long-term exercise, it's a marathon. You need to have very thoughtful planning process. What we do not want to see is today, you install the cheapest technology on the market, it may get outdated in 5 years, and you find yourself with stranded assets. It's very expensive to operate and maintain, right, in 5-8 years. So you really have to, the point of this discussion is really help people to see what is coming. The second part of the competition is really, we need more demonstration to validate these technologies, to build market confidence, to feed information to the manufacturers like Daikin so they can continue to improve their technology. The last but not least, of course, it's always cost, right? We talk about EV, it's really the cost of EV. That's a problem. We're facing the challenge of the economic of scale. It's always more expensive when the manufacturers has produced at a smaller amount. Therefore, they're not prioritizing introducing the new technology to the market because they're more expensive, the demand is low. That's why we kind of getting into this a chicken and egg conundrum. Therefore, policy will play a significant role in lowering the financial and technical risk in manufacturers, as well as user facilities to introduce all of these new policies into the market. The last piece is also we need to support the vendors to be able to carve out the new business to carry this new technology at a scale. All right, so this is my last slide. We need diverse policies to meet different industrial needs. It's not one-size-fits-all situation. These policies will help us build an efficient, clean, and more competitive American industry. That concludes my presentation.
I love that slide about the waste, right? Like manufacturers, they're just looking for every opportunity to squeeze waste out of their process. And it's hard to do that. It's hard to do that. It's hard to make those kind of investment decisions when, they're shorter term. So that was a great presentation. All right, so now we're going to talk with our panelists. One of my colleagues has a microphone. Not sure who that is. It's Whitney. Whitney has a microphone, and she would be happy to come over to you. The reason why the microphone is important is so that people in our live cast audience can listen to the questions as well. If you're in our live cast audience and you have a question, there's still plenty of time. They're coming in, which is great. But if you have a question, you can send us an email, and the email address to use is ask@eesi.org. And while people in the room are working up their courage to ask a question, I'm going to get us started. And Tom, I think it would make sense to maybe come back to you since it's been a little while since we've heard you speak. And it's actually a question that's really somewhat similar. It's actually pretty close to one that we got online as well. But I'm going to start with this one, and then we'll come back to the online question. And the first one is, what are some examples in your experience of how manufacturers can work with the communities where they're locating facilities to ensure that the people in those areas are benefiting from the manufacturing, not just of the final products and the availability of the final products, but also the economic development opportunities that come along with, sustainable manufacturing in their state or their district?
Yeah, and is that working?
Probably. The
Microphone?
lights on.
Okay. Sounds about the same. Yeah, that's a great question, and something that Blue Green Alliance has been particularly concerned about really the entire length that we've been a coalition. The Biden administration did some, and DOE for that matter, did some great work in terms of when companies were applying for federal funding. They had to develop what were called community benefit plans, and those were really a conscious efforts by DOE and the Biden administration to ensure that companies were really reaching out to various stakeholders, including labor unions, but also environmental organizations and a lot of other nonprofit entities and business interests in the community to understand what were the concerns that they were facing and how could they better meet it with this federal funding. So it was really a chance to partner, and we saw a lot of really interesting examples all across the country that came from that, including some really innovative agreements between labor unions and these companies in terms of neutrality agreements or partnerships that already existed to bring job training, to bring childcare, to bring other investments into economic development in communities. Those are things that we hope to see continue as we move into this new administration. We're going to continue pushing on that front. But yeah, like there's been a lot of success stories in the last 4 years on this front.
Great, thanks. And Leilani, we're going to go down the lines. We'll give everyone a chance to answer. Leilani, in your sector, what are some examples of how all of these different kinds of things that go into the electric cars or support the availability of electric cars? What are some of the other benefits with communities?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that question. We've been doing some work through the Zeta Education Fund to actually go into the communities and talk about how these ecosystems are being developed. I'll make a note of a couple of places that we've gone to Arizona. We're going to Nevada in a couple of weeks. We were just in Savannah last week to kind of uplift the work that these communities are developing. So we were, our event was at Savannah Technical College, and they actually have a partnership with Hyundai to develop a EV repair course and get folks in a pipeline to actually be working in the facility and working on these vehicles as they're getting their certificate out. Something that I also want to note that one of our companies, Panasonic, has mentioned. They said this quote a couple years ago, but it always clung to me as bringing jobs to the community, not pulling the community to a job. So they actually, when you're looking at these gigafactories, there's like a 15 to 20 point matrix that folks look at when they're like actually doing the site tour. It's about community involvement, state and local incentives. will they have power to the gigafactory? So, when they're partnering with the University of Kansas, the Johnson Community College, the chamber to sustain these developments and create pipelines for apprenticeships. Young folks are holding a phone all day. They might as well learn how the lithium-ion battery works. Um, and using workforce development courses, like Lucid is using Drive 48, which involves government, industry, and academia together to support their training programs back in Arizona. So a lot of these things happen holistically and organically on the ground, but it's really about getting folks together and really saying, we have this investment happening in the United States. Let's make it about the people in this community more than anything else. And how do we do that? Is getting the right people who are on the ground floor to make sure that their voices are being heard and can sustain that investment.
Great, thanks. So heat pumps, refrigerants, get to know how those work, and then also lithium-ion batteries.
Yeah.
It's fascinating, actually, how it works in reality. Charlie, same question to you. You all have these facilities that are existing, and they've had positive effects on their communities.
Yeah, and we participated in the defense production of heat pumps application process, and part of that was we created a community benefits plan. And it was interesting because we found that many of the things we were already doing, workforce training at the factory, but also for us, we're bringing a new product to the United States, okay, and which is the air-to-water heat pump. But heat pumps in general, there's not a lot of technicians nationally who know how to work on heat pumps. So a big part of our commitment was a lot of training that will help technicians install heat pumps versus the simpler installation of an air conditioner, installing heat pumps over a natural gas furnace. And so the community benefits plan wasn't too difficult for us to create because there's a lot of activities we're doing. We have I'm going to forget the name of it, but it's one of the Department of Labor apprenticeship programs. It's one of the training programs. It's mechatronics that's been recognized at our factory in Houston. But all of our factories, we're struggling to find a workforce because the workforce today, with unemployment so low, and every other major manufacturer in your area offering signing bonuses, you have to do everything you can to keep that workforce there. So there's a lot of community activity we do, and then is just one more thing we're doing in Houston. We've been working with the Houston Housing and Community Development Department. We, over the next 3 years, are going to install 100 of our high-efficiency, high-tech fit units in low and moderate income households, and part of that is the workforce development. This is a green job, but also it's part of it to be part of that community. And then the last thing I'll mention is today, the Houston Astros are officially announcing that what used to be known as Minute Maid Park is now Daikin Park.
Cool.
So that's another way that we're working with the community, not the same way.
Great. I'm looking forward to those box seats. I visited there last summer. I happened to be in Houston for a conference, and the Red Sox were playing, and I got a great cheap ticket, but it was an awesome seat, and it's a cool place, but it's indoors, and it's a significant heating and cooling challenge because the sun was just beating in those windows, and it was pretty good. It was a great ballpark. Had a nice beer and some peanuts. And it was fun. I think the Red Sox won. Anyway, Charlie, you brought up a great point, and maybe we'll come back to this elsewhere in the Q&A, is actually, we've talked about it in all these, and we did a briefing a couple years ago on the workforce development challenges around EV charging infrastructure. You put these chargers in communities, and you have to maintain them, and that's a different set of skills. Same thing with electric vehicles. It's a different technology, right? You're great at fixing an internal combustion engine, great, but how does those skills apply? And in HVAC, contractors are the workforce. You can only create demand for those heat pumps if you have people who know how to sell them and know how to maintain them. I know we have one in our house, and it's a legitimate challenge. That virtuous cycle is hard to create and hard to sustain. Nora, I'd like to go to you with an opportunity to talk about this question about how communities and manufacturers can work together in your experience to deliver additional benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. I echo what the panelists have said. We work with several cement and concrete companies and chemical companies when they were applying for the industrial demonstration programs. I would say there are several common themes. First of all, they have already been working with communities, as Charlie mentioned, right? They already have the program. They just call it different names: community advisory board and what's it, workforce training programs. So they are there. The second is really being able to help communicate with the community. This new manufacturer is different from the old one. They care about communities. They're more efficient. They're cleaner. I think having this two-way communication is really important. That's what we are hoping to see more from all of this, newer leaders to really truly earn the trust from the communities.
Great, thanks. We got an online question that is related. It's not exactly the same question, but it's related, and I think it might be a good one to dig in. And we can open this up to whoever wants to answer it. But the question is really interesting, and it's about the positive externalities beyond the availability of the product itself, and the benefits of the product that come alongside locating domestic clean energy manufacturing. And the question is also about the question is really about how should we evaluate and quantify sort of those benefits for sustainable manufacturing compared to the status quo. And I imagine that's a really complicated thing to do. But I think it's an interesting question. And, when we project forward, the benefits to these communities, how do we actually do that in a way that captures all of the different, the multiple benefits that come along with this? And I'll open that up to anyone who wants to take a stab at it. And thanks for the person in our audience who asked that question. Go ahead, Leilani.
I think it was something that I was mentioning back in my presentation, but really leaning into the induced jobs. As I mentioned, we're going on the ground and really looking at doing some education about what these investments mean, because not everyone's going to be working the battery plant. You're going to try buy that and be like, that's a giant building. I'm going to keep going now to the grocery store. But when we've been on the ground in Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, we've been hearing from folks talking about these almost implied benefits, but hotels being at full occupancy because people are either looking for homes or they have to be on site for the construction of these plants. I have a really great story of a woman who is a small business owner. She actually opened a food truck in Casa Grande in Arizona to feed Lucid employees because it's a group of people that are there every day. And she's like, great, you're on my stop. And she knows that lunch hour is really busy. We also have heard from folks opening breweries and other small eateries. Like I said, we're going out to Reno in a couple of weeks. And I don't know if anyone's been to Reno recently, but it's quite mountainous and pretty rural. But because of the investments from Panasonic, Tesla, and Redwood Materials, we're seeing Paneras, gas stations, convenience stores, a lot of different opportunities of community buy-in and investment to make sure that we are creating that ecosystem of sustain, that folks can actually build a life around these investments. And I think that's something that the job numbers are great, and the federal policy is so important. But when there's staff in the room, when you're hearing about your constituents and saying like, well, why did your boss support this? And then you can go back and really talk about these partnerships and workforce and these other opportunities in the community that might have not been just because of that Hyundai chose that plant. There's so many things that surround it and choices that are made because of it that we really can build that and make sure that we have a better quality of life around those investments.
Great, thanks. Any other comments in response to the question, Charlie?
Yeah, I can think of sort of two metrics that would show change and progress. One is people's attitudes about heat pumps. I grew up in northeastern Ohio in the late 70s, early 80s, when heat pumps came to our area, and the gas utility, the electric utility was running ads on television saying you should get a heat pump. Here's why. And the gas utility was running ads that say you don't want a heat pump. They blow cool air in the wintertime, and you'll be wearing a sweater and you'll be shivering in your home. That stigma has stuck. Now, in order to overcome that stigma, we have a new showroom where our offices are at 1700 Pennsylvania Avenue, and we have 2 cold climate heat pumps set up in a way that we have the outdoor unit in a cold chamber. We can get that cold chamber down to 8 degrees. And the indoor unit, the parts that would be in your house blowing the warm air, we can show you it blows 120 degrees. And we don't want, it's a showroom not to sell you a heat pump as a consumer. It's a showroom to demonstrate how heat pumps work to you as a policymaker. That's how critical we need to change the hearts and minds about heat pumps work. So if we can, that's one metric. The other one is heat pump and inverter heat pump penetration. As I mentioned, the rest of the world that uses heat pumps, 90% of them are those inverter smart compressor heat pumps. 10% maybe in the United States. If we can get that number to double or triple, that's what Daikin as a company we want to do. It's getting people into heat pumps, but getting people into those smarter heat pumps. So relatively simple metrics, but I think significant metrics.
Great, thanks. Nora, please go ahead.
I will just add the partnership between industry and NGOs, either national, locally, regional, are important, right? We have to go out to say the same message, educate constituents and consumers, assuming we believe in the technology we're bringing forward, right? We just don't go out to advocate whatever. So I think that is really the key part of, we have the metrics, we all have the right messengers. We do independent research, and the others do too, to validate and verify it and convert this information, so people have a sense of safety from us.
Great, thanks. I'm looking around. If anyone has a question, please feel free to raise your hand. We have one in the second row here. Thanks. Thanks, Whitney.
Hi, how are you? Helen Santiago Fink. I'm a climate urbanist. I've managed, I manage actually U.S. ASEAN Smart Cities Partnership in Southeast Asia for the Department of State, probably until next week, and then it might disappear. But that said, I have a question. We started this presentation, this great workshop, in terms of how good the IRA, the bipartisan, and the CHIPS Act, all these bills were in terms of bringing investment to this field of electrification. I'd love to hear your perspective in terms of, given the fluid dynamics in terms of the administration, how do you see the impact of that? And particularly in the fields of aligning electrification of industry with a clean grid. So you're doing manufacturing, but not all these grids, or very few of these grids in this country, in the States, are not clean. So are you bringing your own power, your own clean power, or how is that alignment happening? And also from the perspective of tackling waste and resource circularity, how much is resource circularity a part of the education, the workforce development, and the innovation that needs to take place to actually address the tremendous inefficiencies that exist now and the tremendous potential with resource circularity, particularly looking at critical minerals? Thank you.
Anyone is welcome. We should also just, fluid dynamics is the euphemism of the day. That's doing a lot of work. That's those two words. Anyone would like to respond to the question? Tom, please feel free to go ahead, and then we can work down the line.
Yeah, I'm happy to tackle that first part, because that was something I kind of wanted to emphasize with my presentation, is that policy choices have, brought us to this moment where we're at now, and reversing those choices can, stop the momentum in terms of building new manufacturing plants, but also electrifying industry, decarbonizing industry broadly. So it's going to be something, that we are very focused on over the next few years, but it is, very fluid right now. And there is a lot of uncertainty. There is a lot of policy uncertainty, which by itself can stop some of these investments in their tracks. So it's just something to monitor going forward. But I would just say that policy choices matter, and that's one thing I really wanted to make clear in my presentation.
Great, thanks. Leilani, Charlie, Nora, any thoughts that you'd like to add? Go ahead, Nora.
I can cover part of it's a loaded question, right? You have like a 10 sub questions in it. So I want to talk about electrification and the grid piece. We had a similar conversation 10, 15 years ago when we talk about EVs. It was like, are we going to buy EV because the grid is, even actually dirtier than filling up at a gas station? But looking back today, actually, EV is cleaner. We're glad that we're making the investment decade ago. Similar, if you look at the electric grid, it's getting cleaner and cleaner every day. I think we have to move things in parallel rather than waiting until we have 100% clean grid. We go back to clean them manufacturers. It's just not going to happen that way. We don't have that much time. The second is grid efficiency. The challenge, electricity adequate challenge, I would say the demand growth, so much conversation about data centers, actually industrial, it's part of the drive too. It's like actually more than data centers. It just haven't not been being discussed that much in media too, right? It's not as fun as AI. But that said, the efficiency in all of the sectors, it's able to decrease the demand in the near term, be able to fully utilize what we have already built. If you look at how electricity is being used, it's really the peak is the problem. During the non-peak load, we have abundant electricity. It's being able to reduce the peak, being able to flex where we use energy, utilize. That's another level of efficiency, right? You build this grid, you only use this much in the peak time. The overall efficiency of the grid actually is pretty low. So I would think from that perspective is efficiency first. We still need to move forward with the electrification. That's how we're going to get there eventually.
Leilani, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for your question, by the way. Quite fluid. So I think, sorry, I'm loud anyways. But looking at the ecosystem, I think first of all, I will say that there is a caveat that the grid will vary from region to region across the United States due to our makeup. But I do think that as more EVs come online, we do have opportunities for bidirectional charging, distributed energy resources, managed charging programs. And there are, some utilities that are really bought into this space that are providing incentives for EV drivers to say, charge with us that so we can have that electricity so that when we're on a peak load, we can shave that off through a managed charging system and use those analytics for future load growth programming. There's other opportunities where EVs are like mini data centers themselves of like how much electricity they're taking in, how can they be utilized in an emergency situation. I think that I think from the private sector perspective, I think folks are just hesitant to make any big moves right now, given where everything is, how things are moving on the federal side. There has been a lot of proactive and productive investment across these supply chains. And I don't think that the momentum is going to completely stop, right? There's just too much capital that has been invested across the supply chains, across all of our supply chains, truthfully, to make sure to say that yeah, it's a no-go, we're going back to the status quo. But how do we integrate where and empower state and localities as well to discuss we want to be a proactive and productive locality that can is it in EV incentives, working with their local utility to increase managed charging programs? I think the ultimately we'll also have more. You mentioned critical minerals and the circularity of them as well. Because we have these batteries that can be depleted and have dual use or a second time use and creating a circular supply chain, we have another opportunity for battery storage and large grid scale storage paired with renewables to shave off peak offload. That's all to say. It's really there's a momentum for utility buy-in, and it has to be through private sector investments. I think there is opportunity for us to continue. It's probably a little bit gray where things go from here, but there is a shared vision of American competitiveness and American prosperity that a lot of folks in this room agree on, and EVs are a part of it. So I do think we're onto something here, and the reason why I'm here today is because it's the time to fight for that future.
Looking around for other questions. Oh, we've got one in the. No, you please go ahead. Yep. Raneem works for us.
Oh,
She can ask the question also. We want to make sure you definitely get a chance
Thank you.
to ask it.
Hi, I'm Emily Lozier. I'm a fellow at the Department of Energy and Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Office, so very interested in all of your remarks today. Thank you. I had two questions. Firstly, what in your view, and this is a question for the entire panel, do you see as being the fastest growing clean manufacturing sectors in terms of workforce growth? And somewhat related to that is a kind of a follow-on. Which of those sectors might have the greatest mismatch in which workforce is a key bottleneck? So that's kind of the first set of questions. The second question, I work in energy efficiency specifically of microelectronics and also look at power electronics, R&D, and workforce. So I'm curious about power electronics as an enabler for a lot of these electrified systems and clean manufacturing. Are any of your organizations looking at power electronics manufacturing in relation to clean manufacturing in this way? And if so, do you have any insight on the growth of that sector as well?
Well, our guest has given us a lot of questions to answer. I think they're all pretty interesting. Tom, do you have anything you'd like to add? And then maybe we'll go down the line and we'll go to our next questioner.
Yeah, I can take a stab at that first one. In terms of where the most jobs are being created, I would say that again, a part of that is what are the sectors that are investing the most. And if you look down at the data on that front, you'll see that there's been a lot of growth in solar, semiconductors, and then batteries in particular. Um, and then, as I noted in my presentation, a lot of different components go into each of those supply chains, and there's various degrees of how much labor each facility needs. So I would say it's hard to break down on a sector by sector basis, and I'm sure some of my fellow panelists might have a better idea in their certain sectors on that front. But looking at it from like a broad lens in terms of the clean economy overall, I would say that where you're going to see the job growth and those occupations that I highlighted in my presentation, where you're seeing growth, a lot of them are coming from the fastest growing sectors themselves.
While Leilani is working up her response, I'll put a quick plug in for our climate jobs fact sheet. It's very well cited as well. And so if you wanted to dig into any of those, it's renewable energy, it's energy efficiency, it's clean transportation. It's a great resource, and we can make sure if you find one of us wearing a lapel pin, we can also make sure that you get that. Leilani, go ahead.
Thank you for your question, and thank you for your work at DOE. So I'll just speak on the battery side because I don't know anything else. We have seen, of course, a huge uptick in battery plants coming online or soon to be coming online later this year, 2026. There is a bottleneck, I think, especially with young people. They don't really understand what an EV job or working at a battery plant is, so to speak. I think a lot of folks in recent years, we've been pushing what a STEM job is. A lot of them just want to be YouTubers at this point, which they're also like making six figures and they're like 15. So I can't deny them that course. But it is, we really do need how to entice young people or just really reach out to young people and say, like, you're not working at the dingy plant that was down the road and it's like covered in dust and stuff. These plants are new, clean, climate controlled. They have the brand new technology. You're working with robots, and you're really going through a different version of what an auto manufacturing plant is. So I think part of that is like uplifting the partnerships, like I said, with the community colleges and academia, and saying, like, you're on the bridge of your career. It's okay, you want to be a YouTuber, but we also have other things here in this community. If you want to be by home or if you want to leave home, how do we really discuss that? So looking at even just media campaigns or testimonials of folks on the ground repairing an EV charger, and it's just like two regular guys joking, goofing off, fixing an EV charger and heading out. I think that needs to be out a little bit more because the bottleneck is a little unclear of what a battery or an EV job really is. You see a vehicle on the road, but they're like, how does that get built? So we, as an education side, trying to dig in a little bit more into that curiosity and elevate those questions and also demystify that process, because there's a lot of people across the country that are dying for people to come to these plants. They are so eager, and you would think that their legacy autos, their new plants coming online, that people will be lining up around the door to come to these jobs, and they're simply not. And I think that's part of that we need to do some more education. I don't have a great answer for your power electronics question, though, so I will maybe kick it over to our panel.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Yeah, and I too don't have a good answer, though I suspect somebody at our factory down in Texas or one of our other factories would. So if you want to connect afterwards, I can potentially get you answers there. We've talked about solar and wind and some other things. In the HVAC industry has been around a long time. We don't have that disruptor that is EVs or solar or some of these other things. And so, I would call heat pumps the closest thing to a disruptor in our industry, but they've been manufactured in the United States too. But our bottleneck is clearly the technician level. We have been, as an industry, we have been struggling. We have the pig and a python situation. The average age of the technicians out there installing products is at the far right end of the chart. And as that cohort moves through, as that pig moves through that python, and every year that average age goes up higher, we are not pulling students. And part of it is, for so long, we've pushed kids into a 4-year college, and we have sort of not looked at associate's degrees. I will tell you, after I worked at the Air Conditioning Contractors of America for 10 years, some of the biggest, most successful contracting companies that are out there are led by people who never went to a 4-year college. They had very good technical skills. They learned the briefcase skills, and they became successful. And that's what we have to encourage, is more of that. Otherwise, we can make all the heat pumps in the world, and there's no one to install them. And that's why so much of the IRA money was to training, I think they call them home energy assessors, people who came into the home. Maybe they had just enough to then say, okay, you need this, this, and this. And now we train the installers, the technicians. And that was, I think, moving along very well over the last few years. I hope that continues, because that is a nonpartisan issue, which is we need technicians, whether they're installing furnaces or air conditioners and heat pumps.
Nora, do you have anything you'd like to contribute?
I just want to expand what Charlie has mentioned, right? When we talk about the workforce, it's not just who are producing the products, it's also who are delivering those products to consumer. To me, that's some sort of bottleneck. We have not paid enough attention to make sure the existing contractor can install heat pumps, even taking a low carbon cement or newer cement materials. You have this wonderful product. You train the worker actually how to produce them. You don't have contractor who know how to pour them. They send the batches back. There's it doesn't work. It doesn't work the way you used to work with, Portland cement. It worked actually. So this is really kind of the workforce we have to expand to just beyond producing the products. From my personal experience, I got 2 quotes from 2 installers to add EV charging in my garage. One quoted me $300, the other $3,000. I'm glad I made a second phone call, right? This is really where the market is, honestly. The last piece is the training workforce development is ongoing effort. It's not just you put out the training, you give them a certificate, they go through this 1 month training, they will be done. I feel like the support is lacking because it's newer. They don't have their supervisor to tell them what to do. So I think those kind of ongoing efforts, if we can get support from the federal government, is also important to ensure its success.
Great, thanks. Oh, go ahead, Tom. Yeah.
And sorry, just wanted to do one more plug as well that Nora just reminded me of, which is that a big source of job growth right now is on the construction side. As I noted in my presentation, there is a ton of manufacturing construction happening right now. And that heavily relates to the building trades partners that I work with. Those are high growth areas for them right now, building the facilities that are ultimately going to produce those manufacturing workers, especially in semiconductors, but also in data centers, which we mentioned, and solar facilities as well. So just wanted to make that plug.
Great, thanks. We are out of time, unfortunately. I think there might have been one or two questions in the audience. Sorry we couldn't get to you. You're a usual suspect at our briefings, and so you were going to get special treatment, but we have to leave. But this was a great panel, a really excellent discussion. Thanks to our panelists. I think they deserve a quick round of applause. Thank you also to Senator Merkley for helping us with the room today. I'd like to thank everyone who joined us in person. Thanks to everyone in our online audience, and thanks to those who were able to send in questions. Sorry we didn't get to all of them today, but we really appreciate that. I'd like to take a moment to thank some of my colleagues, or actually all of my colleagues, who helped pull the briefing today together. I'd like to thank Dan O, Amory, Allison, Anna, Molly, Nicole, and Hannah. Hannah is our newest team member, and this is your first in-person briefing. And the photos that Hannah's been taking will soon be on the website, so check those out. So thanks, Hannah, for joining us today. We also have 3 tremendous interns. Hadley had to leave a little bit early, but Raneem and Whitney are still with us today, so thanks for all of your hard work. And Whitney, we'll get you an answer to your question, but, sorry. I'd also like to thank Brendan in the back of the room, helping with our videography today, and Troy, who's probably watching us remotely. So this is part 3 of our Congressional Climate Camp Briefing Series. That's a 4-part series. We'll be back in 2 weeks to learn about the Surface Transportation Reauthorization Bill. That's a big one. Some people know a lot about that, but a lot of people don't know much about it. So this is going to be a good one to check out. We also have really great briefings coming up, including one I mentioned before on April 1st about the Sustainable Energy in America Factbook. We also have other great briefings. The best way to keep up with our briefings, including to go back and rewatch the ones. We did one last week on the Colorado River, sustainability in the Colorado River. That was a great briefing. You should definitely go back and check that out online. But we also have articles. I mentioned our climate jobs fact sheet. We have other great resources as well. Sign up for Climate Change Solutions. You can do that if you visit us online at www.eesi.org. And that's just the best way to keep up with everything we've got. So, survey once again. There's a couple new questions in here. If you have 2 minutes or so and you'd like to take the survey, we'd really appreciate that. We read every response, even the ones that aren't so nice, although there really aren't that many. Hopefully that will continue. But we really appreciate all of the feedback. If you're in our live cast audience, I know there was a little bit of buzzing earlier. Sorry about that. But if there are other issues that you had with the live cast or finding the briefings or anything like that, again, we're open to all the feedback, and so we really appreciate that. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Leilani mentioned breweries a couple times. It is 4 o'clock, so maybe some of us will go find something to do for a little while at the end of the day. Thanks to everyone for joining us. Have a great rest of your Wednesday, and we'll see you in a couple weeks for Surface Transportation Reauthorization. Thanks.